So there you have it. That's all you need for today, right? A little bit of Legos goes a long way. We are 2 weeks out from Easter, and in Scripture it's debated. This story, some believe, took place 2 weeks before Easter, and some believe took place only a week before Easter, the day before Palm Sunday. It really depends on how you read some of the language there. So I decided to place it here today as we draw closer to Easter, thinking, what would it have been like 2 weeks before? To witness this moment that many of us have heard time and time again, that is still too unreal to believe for me most of the time. As you saw in that video, this account of the gospel is of a friend of Jesus who dies and then comes back to life. And we're going to spend some of our time in the resurrection today, but most of it in that time in between of waiting for Jesus, waiting for the healing that has not yet come, waiting for the hope that feels so far gone. In that moment of the uncertainty, what do we do? So if you'd like to follow along with me, we're going to be in John chapter 11. If you're using the blue Bibles, this is on page 1120. They're in the pews in front of you or along the walls upstairs. John chapter 11. Jesus is on his way towards Jerusalem, and he is preparing to die. In the other Gospels, by this point, he has now multiple times let his disciples know, I am going to be put to death, and I will rise. And each time they're like, oh, yeah, sure, Jesus, but we're going to go in victory. You're our Messiah. You're our hope. And it's like, no, I'm going to die. And they just don't quite seem to get it. And now we get to John's account where he takes it from a little different perspective, and we see this story beginning in chapter 11, verse 1. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. Just for some context, Jesus had been to Bethany several times before. In fact, he was a dear friend of these three. He had been there before in Luke, I believe, chapter 7, and then again in chapter 10. Jesus is there, and in chapter 7, Jesus is there, and there's two sisters, Martha, who is actively going about her responsibilities to care for and serve her guests. And there's Mary, who is sitting at Jesus' feet. And if you know the story, Martha is mad because Mary is not doing anything or carrying her share of the weight. Everybody who has siblings knows this. And I'm guessing everybody who is married also knows that we as husbands generally forget to carry our weight. We just want to sit and talk, and there's things to be done when we have people over. And Martha is mad, and often she gets this really bad rap for doing all this stuff and missing out on Jesus. Because Jesus says that what Mary has of just being at his feet is the greatest thing. So these are the people he's coming to visit, people whom he spent time in their home. And in another chapter in Luke, Mary actually took oil and anointed his feet, perfume that filled the whole house, and used her own hair to wipe it clean. A sign of a servant and honoring a king, one who is of a greater stature than she could ever imagine being in her presence. John, he identifies this is the Mary and Martha and Lazarus he's talking about. So the sisters sent to him, that is to Jesus, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. I've always found this fascinating. Because when I hear that somebody I love is ill, I think I need to rush to their bedside and be there quickly. I don't want to miss out on the moment or the opportunity or even just the few fleeting minutes before time is gone. It says Jesus loved them, and so he stayed 2 days longer. Right off the bat, when we read this, it should be, in some capacity, jarring. Why are you not rushing to their aid when they've come seeking help? Or are you not rushing to be beside the one you love? Continues. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you. And are you going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." After saying these things, he said to them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover." Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus has died, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." I love this. There's already built-in tension in the story because as they go to Bethany, which is near Jerusalem, the closer they get to Jerusalem, the closer they are to the very epicenter of the people who most hate Jesus and want to see Jesus killed. And the disciples hearing that Lazarus is ill and Jesus saying, "We're going to go to Lazarus." Like, we really shouldn't go. Don't you know how dangerous it is? It may not go well for you if you're there. But Jesus says, "He's already died. I must go." And Thomas, he speaks up in, I think, the best way possible. "Well, if we're going to go, we might as well go and join Lazarus and die like him too. If you want to go and put yourself in harm's way, well, fine, we'll follow you, Jesus, but it's going to kill us, don't you know?" To which Jesus said, "Yeah, I've been telling you it's going to kill me. You'll be fine." When challenged about going to Jerusalem, Jesus says this. He says, "If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world." And I really like the play on words, how Jesus phrases that versus the next part. And the next part, "If anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." See, they're standing before Jesus, who just a few chapters earlier, according to John, said, "I am the light of the world. I am the light that shines in all darkness, and the darkness will not overcome it." And as he's described his death and the pain to come, he's repeatedly said, "I will rise again." He says, look, if you are walking in the day, you see the light of the world. And I wonder if he meant that so that they would hear what he'd been saying previously. You are with me and you can see me. It'll be okay. But those who are walking in the night, in darkness, they don't have any light inside of them. They don't have any hope that is driving them forward towards what is true or good or beautiful, but they're living in a lie. Don't worry, it'll be okay. Then we get to Jesus actually meeting with Martha and Mary. Now, when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. If you've ever been around somebody who's died, it doesn't take very long for death to set in. It doesn't take very long for you to notice that they no longer look quite like they did and feel quite like they did and even smell quite like they did. Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. In Jewish custom, 4 days was long enough for your soul to have left your body to be in the place of the dead, waiting for the life to come. Your soul would have already left in the hopes that God will restore your soul eventually. They believe this happened on the 3rd day. So to stress that he's already been dead for 4 days is to imply that all those who came to grieve with Mary and Martha came believing that his time had come and passed and there was no more hope for him. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him. But Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." This really struck me as I was preparing for today because a little bit later, Mary says the exact same thing. There's no difference between what Martha or Mary say, but there's a big difference in how Jesus responds. See, Martha, oftentimes when I've read this, I've been told, oh, Martha's going out to meet Jesus because she's blaming him and angry. Lord, if you had been here, and she just doesn't quite get it. But actually, as I read this, I thought maybe she's not mad at him. She's just stating the fact. I know what you are capable of. I know who you are, and I know how much you love my brother. If you had been here, I know things would have been different. Martha goes out to meet Jesus on the road. The same Martha who was consumed with all the things she needed to do for the Lord goes to just be near him as soon as she can. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. I love this faith of Martha's. You loved my brother dearly. And had you been here, you would have made all of this better. But I know that even now there's something you can do. Whatever you ask, I know your Father will give. I know whatever you ask, God will do. So please, Jesus, do whatever only you can do. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha responded about like I think I would. I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. I love Martha so much. Because Martha sees Jesus and says, I know you could have done something about it, even now. And Jesus speaks, I'm going to do something about it. Your brother will rise. And Martha still doesn't quite get it. She says, I know he'll rise eventually. She doesn't see the very promise of God for her right now. In the moment, what is about to happen right before her eyes. See, it's really easy for me, like Martha, to know the promise of God as a future promise. I know that one day later, everything will be okay. But to live without worry today, because I look at the world and the trouble around me, it's really difficult. To live in hope right now can be really hard. She knows the future promise, but Jesus says, no, I tell you, I am the resurrection and the life. And I really love Jesus' response. He doesn't say, I'm the way to the resurrection, just through me you get something. No, I am the resurrection. I am the life. You see, our hope as Christians is not that eventually we escape death and escape this world and have life everlasting. Our hope as Christians is Jesus himself. That he is our life. That he wants to come not only in the future on the last day and the resurrection of all the dead, not only then, even now, he is life for you and for me. And it's so tempting to fix our eyes on all the things we think Jesus will do or give for us, and to lose sight of who Jesus is for us. He is everything. He's promised to love wholly. Even as he spoke to his disciples, he said, I'm going to die so that you may live. I'm going to die so that you may have life and life abundant. And think oftentimes, like Martha, we look to the future and say, yeah, that life's for another day. Or we twist the life abundant to think it's this prosperity gospel where I just get to have all the stuff that I want. And both of those are wrong. The life Jesus is giving today is truly life. And it's not all the stuff and all the fame and all the wealth and all the things you think you want. And it's also not something in the future that if only you can die, then you will have it. No, He is the resurrection of the life. And God's promise for you and me is that He is still today everything He was then for Martha. That He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the one who never changes. And I love this story because Martha, when we met her earlier, was the one chastised for being so busy that she forgot to just be with Jesus. And I think for most of us in our Christian walk, in our life with God, we come to faith and we believe and we begin to do all the things we think we need to do. We show up to church on Sunday, we begin to give some of our money, we start going to the Bible studies, we start serving, we do all this stuff for God. Like Martha, we feel this joy or pressure to serve God. Yet, like Martha, we're invited in all of our brokenness and our hurt and our pain to simply come and learn to be with Him. That it's not about what we do for Him, it's about who He is and has done for us and is still inviting us to receive these promises today. It says, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She says, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the anointed one, the Messiah, the Christ, the Savior, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. I believe, Jesus, even now as my brother is dead in the tomb, that you are who you say you are. Even now in the face of this pain and anguish, you are who you say you are, and you will do what you say you will do. And I wonder what it looked like for those who were watching to see Martha looking at Jesus as he looked at her. As he said to her, your brother will rise. And she said, I know eventually. And he said, no, you don't know who I am and what I'm about to do. I am the resurrection and the life. I wonder what her face looked like there in that moment when she said, I do believe that you are the Son of God. See how the story unfolds next is Mary is brought into the mix, and Mary says the exact same thing. If only you had been here, then it would have been okay. But in response to Mary's plea, Jesus doesn't say, well, let me tell you that I am the resurrection and the life. In response to Mary's plea, he doesn't say, well, let me tell you, your brother is again, he's going to rise, it'll be okay. In response to Mary's plea, he says, take me to him, to that place where he lays. And I think the reason why this is given after Martha's question and not Mary's is for every one of us who's caught up in all the things we do for the Lord. He's inviting us simply to hear his promise. I will give what you need. I will be enough even as the pain lingers. I heard this quote the other day and I found it really, really fascinating. Faith is not belief without questions. It's trust without reservation. It's the ability to trust what is true, saying, I don't get it. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to trust this is simply because you say it is. Mary comes to Jesus, and all the Jews get up and they follow, believing she's going to the tomb. And she goes and she cries out to Jesus. And it says in verse 33, when Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. The Greek there for deeply moved could also be translated, he was indignant in his spirit. I love the response of Jesus as he sees the pain of those two ladies whom he loved dearly. He is deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. He is indignant in his spirit and greatly troubled. And I wonder what that indignation in Jesus looked like. He says, take me to where he is. See, it's not indignation that these two sisters would say, if only you had been here. He's not mad that they believed he could have done something about it. I believe this indignation, the deep move in his spirit, was the very heart of God for you and for me. Death is our enemy. It is not our friend. It is not good and something we should long for, something that brings us peace after a great battle. Death is fundamentally against the way God created this world. And when Jesus, moved by the love of these two sisters, of his close friends, and the pain and the sorrow they felt for the death of their brother, he became indignant. See, God is not okay with this enemy who rages against us. God is not okay with you and me staying in a place of sorrow and pain and suffering. In fact, for him, he was so indignant about it that 2 weeks later he would give his very life into the hands of death. That death would be defeated and you and I would have life and life everlasting. That he would be the very resurrection and the life that he promised. Jesus is indignant, deeply moved at death and sorrow and evil and suffering. And when he gets to the place where Lazarus lay, it says Jesus wept. I love that very simple and profound truth. God, the creator of the universe, the one who spoke everything into being, the one who knit every one of us together in our mother's womb, this God sees death and sorrow, and he weeps. Because this is not how it's supposed to be. You and I disconnected and separated from him. As the story goes on, he tells them, move away the stone, and they do, and he prays a prayer to God. God, I know that you will answer this, but so that they may also know. I'm speaking this prayer out loud. And he speaks, Lazarus, come out. And this man who was dead, who by all of their customs, his soul had left his body, and there was no longer any hope. This man comes out of the tomb and rises again. I love this story of Lazarus because it really has very little to do with Lazarus. It's all about Jesus and the promise that he had been making, I will die and I will rise. And so that you may know that I will die and then I will rise, I will speak to this dead man who's been gone for 4 days, and he too will rise. And you will see that my promises are always true. That what I speak will always come to pass, even in the moment when you do not yet understand. Even when right now you don't see what I am doing, my promises will always be true. I've had several people I know and love that have died. I tell you what, I have spoken over every funeral I've ever been to the person who's there before me, that they would come out of that coffin and they would rise. So far, it's never happened. Because what I speak has no power whatsoever. But what God says, it always comes true. For you and me in the midst of sorrow or hardship or pain, or like Martha, caught up in all the things we need to do for God and all the sorrow of our world right now, believing his promises are just for future me and not current me, all of our hardship right now. He says, come and believe and in me you will have life. And you and I are invited today and tomorrow and every day, whatever our circumstance, to see a God who sees death and looks it in the face and is indignant, not with you or with me, but with our enemy who is against us. A God who has and will give everything that we can be his forevermore. And in turn, he can be our God. He can be with us and for us, and we will never again be separate from him. So I want to leave you with this. May the promises of God in your life, that he is enough, that he is the very resurrection and the life. May this promise of God for you strengthen you in your coming and your going and in all that he may do with you. May you know it's not just a future you that he wishes to give peace and comfort and life to. He wishes to do that even now. Will you pray with me? God, your word is true, and what you speak happens. We invite you, Lord, to speak into our heart, where we do a lot of things for you. May we today hear your invitation to just be with you, where we know the future promise but struggle to see it in the present reality. God, may your word be enough for us today. May we trust without reservation, even when our minds are filled with doubt. God, as you are deeply moved over death itself and sorrow and anguish, would you move in us with comfort and peace and hope, not only for the future, but for life abundant today. We ask all of this in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.